Malcolm-Jamal Warner was no stranger to the limelight. From the moment he appeared on screen as Theo Huxtable in The Cosby Show, audiences across the world felt an instant connection. He was the every boy. Smart, funny, flawed, relatable. Millions watched him grow up on television, and in the process, grew up with him. But away from the cameras, from the stage, from the microphones, and applause, there was a side of Malcolm that few ever truly knew. The man who quietly cherished and protected his greatest role of all, that of a husband and father. Fame rarely allows for privacy, but Malcolm never let that stop him from building a world outside the industry, a world that centered around love, peace, and family. In an age where celebrities often document their every move on social media, Malcolm chose silence. He posted sparingly. When he did share, it was often a poem, a piece of art, or a reflection. Never gossip, never spectacle. This wasn't because he was aloof. Those closest to him described Malcolm as deeply grounded, profoundly introspective, and fiercely loyal. But above all, he was protective. He believed some things were sacred, and family was at the top of that list. Malcolm never made headlines for scandal or drama. His love life remained largely off the radar. But what many didn't know was that behind his steady smile stood a partner who grounded him, inspired him, and stood by him through it all. Though he never publicly revealed her name, out of respect for her privacy, sources close to the actor confirmed that Malcolm had been in a long-term relationship with a woman he deeply admired and adored. They married quietly, far from the Hollywood glare. No magazine spreads, no paparazzi shots. Just love, real, enduring, and private. She wasn't an actress, and she never wanted to be. She worked behind the scenes in education and arts outreach, helping young people find their voice through creativity, a passion that Malcolm shared and often supported through his own philanthropic efforts. Their love story wasn't about red carpets. It was about shared values, whispered conversations at night, and raising their daughter with intention and grace. If there was one role Malcolm never wanted to act, it was fatherhood. He wanted it to be real, raw, and present. In 2017, he confirmed in an interview that he had become a father, saying only, "It's something I've always wanted, but never rushed." And he didn't say more. That child, a daughter, became the axis on which his world turned. Friends say fatherhood softened him. He'd always been thoughtful, but after becoming a dad, Malcolm slowed down even more. He picked projects carefully. He avoided late-night gigs unless absolutely necessary. When he wasn't working, he was home. Home, a word he often used in his later interviews. Not as a location, but a feeling. A place of trust, truth, and tenderness. He wanted his daughter to know that her father, though a public figure, belonged to her first. That in a world full of noise, she would always be heard by him. There are no public photos of her, no tabloid stories, no viral moments. And that's exactly how Malcolm wanted it. He understood what childhood in the spotlight could do, and he was determined to give her the freedom he never fully had, the freedom to grow privately, to fail quietly, and to dream loudly. In recent years, fans began noticing a new tone in Malcolm's poetry and spoken word performances. More tenderness, more warmth, more hope. Lines like her giggle, my salvation, or she calls me daddy like it's a superpower hinted at a love that went deeper than art. Though he never confirmed whom he was writing about, many believe those pieces were quiet love letters to his daughter, to his wife, to the life he protected so fiercely. He spoke less about fame and more about peace, less about legacy and more about presence. In one podcast episode, he said, "Being known is not the same as being understood. My family understands me. That's enough." Now, in hindsight, those words feel like a soft farewell, not just to fans, but to the life he built, slowly, lovingly, and intentionally. Since the news of his passing, his wife and daughter have not made any public statements, and that silence, much like the privacy he fought to give them, is sacred. Friends of the family have only shared that they are grieving deeply but quietly. Those who knew them describe their home as a space of warmth, creativity, and healing. His wife, they say, is devastated but resolute in honoring his wishes, to mourn privately, to love loudly, and to keep their daughter shielded from unnecessary pain. Malcolm-Jamal Warner didn't need to perform fatherhood or marriage for the cameras. He didn't share daily selfies or engage in attention-grabbing interviews about his home life. He wasn't the type to parade his daughter across magazine covers or use his wife as a prop for red carpet headlines. Instead, he gave us something far rarer: authenticity, a quiet reminder that real strength is not in being seen, but in being present. That real love isn't loud, it's consistent. In an era where oversharing has become currency, Malcolm chose privacy over performance. While some celebrities built brands around their personal lives, Malcolm built a sanctuary, behind closed doors, away from scripts, cameras, and stage lights. He was a husband, a father, a man who loved deeply, but privately. For years, fans speculated about his relationship status. Occasionally, a photo might surface, or a red carpet appearance might trigger rumors. But Malcolm never played into it. He once said in an interview, "Some things are too sacred to broadcast." That philosophy wasn't just about romance. It was about protecting the people he loved from the cruelty of the spotlight. Fame had already taught him how brutal and invasive it could be. He wasn't going to let that touch the life he'd built. Though he kept her name away from tabloids, it was no secret to those close to him that Malcolm was deeply in love. His wife, a beautiful and grounded woman outside the entertainment world, was never the subject of paparazzi fodder. She didn't chase clout or fame. She didn't need to. She had something infinitely more valuable: his trust. Friends say she was his peace, a quiet place to land after long days. Someone who reminded him who he really was beneath all the titles: actor, director, Emmy nominee, activist. To her, he was just Malcolm. And to Malcolm, she was the anchor in a world that often tried to pull him away from himself. Their relationship was built not on spectacle, but on poetry, laughter, patience, and late-night talks. He wrote her love letters, not posts. He celebrated anniversaries in private, not on Twitter. And when asked why he never made his marriage more public, he responded with a soft smile and a sentence that now feels especially poignant: "The more real it is, the less it needs an audience." Becoming a father changed Malcolm in ways no role ever could. Those who knew him during the early Cosby Show days recall how naturally he stepped into the big brother role to child actors on set. So it surprised no one that fatherhood would come to him like second nature. His daughter, born in quiet celebration far from flashing bowls, was his world. He read her books at bedtime, never tired of hearing her giggles, and always made time to show up for school events, for scraped knees, for every "Daddy, look at this" moment. But more than being physically present, he was emotionally available. He listened. He taught. He led by example. She knew who he was in the world, but more importantly, she knew who he was at home: gentle, funny, patient, wise. And while her identity remains respectfully guarded from public view, those closest to the family say she inherited his depth, his kindness, his way of seeing the world a little differently, his belief that silence can speak volumes. Her father never needed to be perfect. He just needed to be there. And he was, in every way. Malcolm-Jamal Warner could have commodified his life. He could have launched a reality series. He could have leveraged his podcast to reveal more about his relationships. But he didn't, because what he had, with his wife, with his daughter, wasn't content. It was life. Real, imperfect, beautiful life. And that was enough. He understood something most never do until it's too late: that the most important parts of life don't need a spotlight. They need protection. And he guarded his family with fierce, quiet devotion. When he passed, there was no family drama made public. No mess of statements or confusion, just grief. Silent, searing grief from those who had the privilege of knowing the version of Malcolm most never saw. The one who made pancakes on Sunday mornings, who played jazz vinyl during dinner, who wrote handwritten notes for lunchboxes, who kissed his wife's forehead before long days on set. In the end, his greatest legacy may not be Theo Huxtable. It may not be the Emmy nominations or the award-winning performances. It may not even be the groundbreaking podcast episodes that have resurfaced in the wake of his death. His greatest legacy might be the little girl he read bedtime stories to, the woman he whispered poems to in the early morning hours, the home he kept sacred, and the love he refused to exploit. Because while the world mourns the loss of a star, a voice, a cultural icon, a family mourns their center. A daughter mourns the father who was never too busy. A wife mourns the man who never made her feel second to anything. And they grieve not just the loss of his presence, but the echo of his quiet protection. Malcolm-Jamal Warner didn't live for the spotlight. He lived for something richer, the kind of love that doesn't need applause. And that, perhaps, is the truest form of legacy. Malcolm-Jamal Warner showed us what it means to grow, to evolve, and to protect what matters most. Behind the camera, beyond the stage lights, was a man who chose integrity over attention, substance over spectacle, and intimacy over applause. In a world where fame is often worn like a mask, Malcolm wore his humanity instead, quietly, humbly, and with astonishing grace. We first met him as a teenager, the wisecracking Theo Huxtable, charming and full of life. But as the years unfolded, so did the man behind the role. He matured not just in age, but in depth, in empathy, in artistry. He went from sitcom royalty to soulful poet, from on-screen brother to real-life protector of his own little family. His evolution wasn't loud or manufactured for headlines. It was authentic, purposeful, grounded. While the world praised his performances, Malcolm was building something else behind closed doors, a life of meaning. A private universe where love was not a brand, but a bond. Where fatherhood wasn't a photo op, but a sacred promise. Where partnership was rooted in mutual respect, not publicity. He didn't need the world to know every detail, because the people who mattered already did. His art reflected that same philosophy, whether on stage, on screen, or behind a microphone. Malcolm shared only what was necessary, and it always mattered. His podcast episodes were full of wisdom, heartache, introspection, and sometimes a weight that we now understand more deeply. They weren't just entertainment. They were emotional blueprints, mapping the soul of a man who had seen much, learned more, and still chose to give. And now, in his absence, what remains is more than memory. It's legacy. Not just in the clips that will be replayed or the tributes that will be shared, but in the quiet things. A bedtime story whispered to his daughter, a handwritten note tucked into a drawer, a moment of advice given to a friend at just the right time. These are the echoes of a life well lived. These are the threads that bind his soul to ours. Even his silence speaks now. In a world that never stops talking, Malcolm's decision to step back, to protect what mattered most, to live his final years out of the spotlight, was a final act of love. It was a message to all of us. You don't have to be seen to be significant. You don't have to be loud to leave a legacy. His passing leaves a gap that feels more like a crater. For fans, yes, but more so for the people who knew the real Malcolm. The man who laughed too hard at dad jokes. The man who scribbled poetry in the margins of his scripts. The man who made time for others even when his own heart was heavy. The man who stayed soft in a hard world. And for those of us who only knew him through his work, there's still something deeply personal about this loss. Because we grew up with him. We saw ourselves in him. We believed for a time that Theo Huxtable lived in our own homes, and in many ways he did. But it was Malcolm's heart, not the script, that made Theo unforgettable. His story may have reached its end, but the truth is, it lives on in everyone he touched, in the artists he inspired, in the daughter he raised, in the woman he loved, in the roles he redefined, in the family he called his own, both on screen and off, and in the fans who, now more than ever, understand the depth of what they lost. Rest easy, Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Your voice may be silent, but your message roars. Your spirit, gentle, wise, and unwavering, lingers in the spaces you once filled. You taught us how to grow up without growing cold, how to be present without being performative, how to love, quietly, courageously, and completely. The world is a softer, sadder place without you, but it is also stronger because of you. Thank you, Malcolm, for everything.